Hello, and welcome back to This Month Above the Fold, a monthly series on the Commerce Collective podcast where Danny Hoffman, Senior Director of Global Retail Strategy at Flywheel, and I cover the most important topics in commerce each and every month. Clearly, this podcast must be doing okay because, as you can see, I've got some new equipment going on. Look at this, the camera follows me. There's more lighting. I look great, right? Okay. I am your host, Emma Irwin, and today we're talking about Amazon taking the top spot on the Fortune 500, how shorter Amazon titles, greater protection for big brands, and Alexa plus agentic ads are shaping the consumer experience. And finally, we'll talk about how Walmart's latest streaming moves are pushing commerce media further into a full funnel experience. Let's get into it.
Danny, how are you this month? How are you handling the heat over there?
I just came back from Prague this weekend, so I have found the beauty of 3x3 basketball. I went with a group. We played in a basketball tournament in Prague, which is not something I thought I would ever say in my life. The weather, for those that speak Celsius, was 42 degrees in
Terrible.
a gym without AC. For those that don't speak Celsius, it was hot, and I've never sweated more in my entire life. It was great. It was an amazing experience.
I love that. I'm kind of impressed you all stayed alive running around in a gym with no AC at that temperature, but
Alive was dicey. It was a lot of hydration, a lot of strategy, those electrolytes, bananas. It was like we were really hustling, but it was good. It was really good.
for sure. Amazing. Okay, before we get going, Prime Day was last week. So, of course, I have to ask you, did you buy anything interesting or not interesting from Prime Day?
No, a bunch of household supplies that were on discount. I looked at but didn't purchase a like an external hard drive. And this is okay. Where I think the world is headed. Big prediction. Everyone has now had iPhones or some sort of smartphone for the last, I don't know, 2 decades. How many pictures do you have? How much storage do you have on your phone? Do you have enough storage?
Currently, I do, but that's because I pay for a lot of storage. I was traditionally the person that ran out and ran out and ran out. And I think there's probably like 20,000 photos on there.
Yeah. I am the person who does not pay for storage. I have run out of storage. I can't download an app. I can barely take a picture. External hard drives are the future, or cloud. But like it's either put your stuff in the cloud or put your stuff on an external hard drive. And like that's the photo album of our future children's experiences. They're gonna have like a little thing that they plug in and they're like, oh, that's when mom and dad went on vacation.
Beautiful. Okay. Let's get into it. What are we talking about today? We're talking about Amazon knocking Walmart out of the Fortune 500 top spot. We're going to do like a smorgasbord of other Amazon topics and then talk about some of Walmart's latest streaming moves. So story number 1. For the first time in 13 years, Walmart is no longer number 1 on the Fortune 500. Amazon has taken that top spot after surpassing $700 billion in revenue in 2025, with Walmart moving to number 2, obviously. So only 4 companies have ever held that number 1 position in the history of Fortune 500. Obviously, Amazon taking that number 1 spot is huge, but like, what does this really tell us about how commerce is shifting?
I don't know if this is a commerce shift. I think this is an Amazon shift. We were talking about this yesterday, but like, what does it mean to be the number 1 company on the Fortune 500? And you're right, Walmart has had it for the last decade and a half. This is significant. Amazon, if Amazon was just a commerce entity, they would not be the Fortune 500 number 1 company. You and I were looking at some of the earnings reports from Amazon over the last probably 15 years. And when you look at the trend of how much of Amazon's revenue is made up of its retail business, it's actually been declining as a percentage of their total revenue over time. Amazon is a retailer that is not a retail company. Amazon sells ads. Amazon sells cloud computing capability. Amazon sells memberships. That is where the majority and increasing amount of the revenue comes from. So I think that this is representative of a shift, but not a shift necessarily in commerce as much as a shift in the expansion that if you are a retailer, your margins are usually, depending on the retailer, incredibly tight. And so diversification, arguably away from your core retail business, is the way to continue to stay afloat if you're one of these big players.
Gotcha. And I think I'm thinking through your point of it's not necessarily a commerce shift. Like Walmart is a retailer, right? Like you would agree that at the end of the day, Walmart is a retailer. And so I'm kind of, because so many people think about Amazon as a retailer, which is why I positioned the question as a commerce question, because I knew you were going to then say it's not a commerce question. But like, What does that mean for Amazon as a retailer? Like, do you think they're ever going to move away from the retail business, or that'll always be part of it?
Well, so I think that's a really interesting question. Is like, does Amazon ever decouple .com from AWS, from Amazon Ads, from Prime, from streaming and from the studios? Like, so this sort of came up in the antitrust cases against the big four tech companies, where the case that Amazon was making, arguably, is, well, I'm not competing with, I'm not too big because my competition over here is Walmart. My competition over here is somebody like. The argument is that they were like, well, we are internally so fragmented that we aren't competing as this entity that is this behemoth because we have so many different segments that we play in. I think that's the debate, is what even is this thing? The vision originally was we're the everything store, and I'd argue it's the everything company. It's not even a store anymore. We'll talk a little bit more about like broader selection and the future of 3Ps on Amazon too. But I think this is a shift where this is more representative to me of what it looks like when you invest heavily in something that costs a lot of money and you turn significant capital expenditure into a revenue stream. So the future version of this is you look at the companies that are spending the most money right now on infrastructure that is going to create a moat, that moat being hundreds of billions of dollars in AI. The end goal was not burn cash to run AI. The goal is eventually something else. And so like, what has Amazon built that then allows for them to be able to take that next step into everything company? That as the world shifts around this new technology, what does that then unlock for Amazon? The end goal isn't AI. The end goal is obviously something else. The thing that is most important if you're going to be a successful company in general is, do you have enough of a compelling case to potential consumers to bring them in to the, like, to use your product or service? And so where you and I were talking about yesterday is like, a lot of retailers have used media as a way of offsetting retail margins. And it does a lot of other things. It builds brands and it creates a flywheel. And if the brands are big enough or the people are aware of the products and where to buy them, the consumers will come and the flywheel will spin. I think the other lens of this is also about membership. And so that's the connection between retailers and streamers, is every person is paying for a certain number of subscriptions, but you can only pay for so many. And so if the subscription and the retailer are together in some way, for the advertisers and brands, they have to pick so many that they can advertise against. They don't have infinite dollars. And for the consumers, they have to pick so many they can subscribe to. They also don't have infinite dollars. This is likely continued aggregation around membership, and then continued push, if I care about measurement, continued push probably toward identity resolution that sits with cloud, that sits in clean rooms. But I think that there's more to that than just advertising dollars. I think there's probably significantly more in terms of consumer value and connectivity across consumer touchpoints in all of the things that they get from a membership.
Would you have ever imagined, let's say like when you started your career, that these big retailers that you know of at the time were going to be like involved in streaming and all of these membership programs that extend beyond like the like loyalty card that you use for gas points, and like now you think about Prime and like, but I'm also getting these TV shows that I want and flipping it around. Like, could you have ever processed such a thing?
Especially the comment on gas. The rabbit hole that this made me go down was actually not Amazon or Walmart. It was Costco. And I have become infatuated with Costco as a result of being like, well, why is Amazon the number one company in the Fortune 500? What are they doing? What's their business? And I was like, oh, well, retail businesses don't make any money. Costco has created this incredible business that is purely based on value of membership and getting the literal cheapest product per SKU at the highest possible quality that keeps members coming in because they go by pallet and they never actually have to touch any type of fulfillment, last mile, or shipping. And it's brilliant. And so what they've actually done is like, there's no significant diversification into 8 other revenue streams. It's just the core business model with $1.50 hot dogs. Like, it is so cool. And so seeing the juxtaposition between these two things, where it's like Amazon is going in this other direction, Walmart is going in a direction where they're pushing much more their online business, even though they have this huge physical in-store footprint. And then you have like other retailers like a Costco who are doing what they've been doing at a very fixed margin for a very long time and continuing to build really successful businesses. Each of their individual stores, I think, does like 250 million in revenue and could be its own standalone company. It's so cool. But I think this all comes back to membership, collective membership. If I have a Costco membership, what have I now not subscribed to instead? And that becomes the choices that everyone is fighting for. So Prime Day is a really good example where so many of the products that you can buy are only buyable if you have a Prime subscription. Prime Day is less about significant retail revenues and is much more about increasing subscribership and LTV.
I interviewed Mark Williamson from Costco maybe like a year ago, and we were talking about the Costco membership because I had mentioned I don't have one, and he was like, it's not because I work for Costco, but like, that's so dumb of you. Why don't, like, there's so much you could have in this in terms of like healthcare, getting your tires changed, everything you could ever need. And he was like, you're wrong in thinking that because you're one or two people that it's not worth it for you. Like, it's so worth it. Look into it.
I mean, like, if I'm going to hot take this, and maybe this is its own future episode or paper at some point in time, but the healthcare piece I think is fascinating. So like Costco has opticians, Walmart has pharmacy in store, Amazon has pharmacy, and then the One Medical acquisition and PillPack. Like, there's been so much investment where retailers and healthcare are merging. And I don't necessarily think that retailers will replace like an ER or a hospital, but I do think that retailers owning last mile or fulfillment of healthcare products is where this is eventually going to head. And so if I have a membership that has my identity and my purchase behavior that is tied to all of my other behaviors, my health behavior, my streaming behavior, why in the world wouldn't I fulfill through that? And especially like when you look at Amazon Pharmacy online, most of those products are things that are shy to buy. ED pills, hair loss supplements, like stuff that I would love to have shown up at my house in a nondescript corrugate box and not have to go to a shelf for. Like, this is exactly where healthcare is probably headed, but no one's been able to crack this gigantic industry. And so like that, back to round out the story, the Fortune 500, when you look at the rest of the players on this list, it's retailers, it's tech companies, and it's healthcare companies. Like, that's who the biggest companies in the world are.
I think Costco will probably stick to the term retailer for a longer, but it like feels like we need a new word. And I know we've used like one-stop shop or the everything store that in order to describe these stores that have all these services and whatnot in there. But I feel like we need to develop a new word, and maybe this already exists and I just haven't paid attention. But it's like, are they really retailers if there's so much more there? And like, I go to Target to get my eyes checked and I don't buy anything from Target. And that's because that's what I have here. But yeah, like, is it a retailer anymore? How do we kind of differentiate the big guys versus traditional retailers?
We're in an industry that it changed dramatically several times. Like, it changed dramatically when ads were introduced, changed dramatically during COVID when there was no in-store. I think it's changing even more dramatically. And I do wonder what happens to smaller individual, like mom and pop or corner store retailers, or even in Europe where it's just so heavily fragmented. We talked about Joybuy a couple months ago because it goes across multiple markets. Like, is multi-market aggregation and multi-market retailers, is that where things are headed to? These things getting bigger and more encompassing feels like the trend, but we'll see.
And it's interesting. Okay, this is my actual last comment before I move us on. But being in Europe for 2 weeks and like just seeing I was at a friend's house who lives in Hamburg, and I could like walk down the stairs and go to about 5 different very tiny grocery stores, but they're all part of chains and like they all are brands. They're not just necessarily mom and pop. Well, there were some mom and pop shops, but it's just such a different experience than what you get in the US. So it is fascinating to look at what'll happen over there versus here. Story number 2, as I mentioned, is an absolute smorgasbord of Amazon-related stories in here. Amazon shortening titles to 75 characters, including spaces, but also introducing a new item highlights field. Amazon is reportedly going to be like giving big brands some more control over product listings and prioritizing the brand's own submissions when it comes to content on the PDP. It says etc. And then we also have Alexa plus agentic ads if we get there. And so three things all kind of happening at the same time. But I'm curious for you, for the first two headlines, which are the shortening titles and more brand protection, like, are they really about shorter titles and catalog cleanup, or do you think Amazon is trying to make the shopping experience feel more controlled and trustworthy? I know you have thoughts on this, and you've had thoughts for a long time.
Oh, okay. All right. So let's start with the 75 character thing too, but I find the brand elevation thing more interesting. But I think it's all converging around the same point. 75 character thing is like for a long time, keyword stuffing has been the bane of SEO. And it was like, I'll just throw every keyword in the title and hope it sticks, and they look terrible and it's unreadable, quite literally unreadable. Consumers don't care. And there were a couple of web labs and adjustments over the last decade where if you have a bunch of products in the same variation, it'll truncate down to the lowest common denominator of title or whatever. But I think the question mostly is, does the title in search actually showcase the product that you're trying to buy? So if you're a consumer navigating a shelf, you can be like, oh, that's the one. I couldn't quite tell from the picture, but I can tell from the title that that's the one I'll click on and I'll engage and I'll see if that PDP matters to me. Titles also serve another purpose. It's an SEO play. It's relevancy to keywords. All of that does not matter if the shelf is 5 products in a chat. And so arguably 75 characters is a way of Amazon acknowledging, one, no one's reading that, and two, titles are actually less relevant for Alexa for shopping and than the rest of the content that is both visible to consumer and also on the back end. So all of the things that come together to make for this new truncated shelf experience that is tied to prompt are very different from the things that we previously thought were significant around what is relevant for search. The two experiences still very much exist, but Prime Day was a phenomenal example. In the States, Alexa for shopping was a guided experience where it first went not, hey, how can I help? But it was, what deals do you want to see? You want to see deals that are under $50? You want to see those in this category? To shop all good Prime Day deals? In Europe, I don't know if you had this experience, there was no Alexa for shopping. It was still Rufus, still branded as Rufus on amazon.co.uk. And when you click into Rufus, there was no way to navigate to the deals. It was, and if I typed in show me best Prime Day deals, it would link out to the landing page that you would still get from the homepage, where it's just a list of all the deals. And I still had to comb through it manually. So cool that you can kind of see them next to each other during the same event. And the benefit of Alexa for shopping, what this also means is that if titles are truncated, it means that a lot of the relevancy comes from somewhere else. It also means that your title actually has to be punchy and tell a story, because if you're on a shorter shelf, it has to now be relevant to a shorter, more direct prompt, meaning that you are really targeted with what you are saying in your title. It actually has to make sense rather than just being a whole bunch of random keywords that you hope find a consumer on a random shelf. That's the titles piece.
On to brand protection. Before we get into that, I'm curious. Back in the origin of your Flywheel career, do you have an estimate of how many RBS tickets you might have submitted to change product attribute fields because a third-party seller had inputted something? Because I'm going to guess mine's like 3,000 to 5,000.
I think your quantity might beat mine, but it's close. I started Flywheel as a specialist. Like, my life was engaging with RBS. They were my closest friend. Friend of me, but yeah, thrilled to not have to do that as much anymore. Automation also sometimes helps too, but like Amazon also spent a lot of time trying to push people to have the point of truth be what was correct. So like the item details, rather than try to cut ad hoc tickets, and then use sort of the item details as like a mini PIM. But I mean, it's clunky. But arguably, like, that's the thing that probably needs to be the most correct. You're not going to be able to help desk your way through true relevancy. It is the stuff that goes on the back end, which means you have to have full catalog correctness across every attribute, which, what a pain. And that's a challenge.
Okay. I saw in a Slack thread, your comment to this story was, this
Yeah.
may show Amazon shifting from broadest selection to the best brand experience. What do you mean by that? That's word for word quote from Danny Hoffman in a Slack thread.
Okay.
What do you mean?
So brand elevation, which I didn't see this super publicly, but this came from The Information leaked this, and I thought this was fascinating. Okay, so what Amazon had said. As of June 1st, all sellers, including wholesale suppliers that sell goods to Amazon directly, will no longer be able to create new catalog entries for branded items unless the original brand or manufacturer has designated them as an authorized seller through brand registry. So what does that mean? It means that instead of open marketplace broad selling, brand now takes a hierarchy, and trademark now takes a hierarchy where Amazon is trying to have official authorized brands. This is a shift. So when you look at the growth of Amazon, especially the growth of Amazon and e-com, when they went to open marketplace, it did two things. The flywheel effect took over, where you had the most selection and an endless aisle, but you also had a significant influx of seller fees, which is where Amazon was making a ton of margin to offset the low retail margins we were talking about earlier. So selling fees from third-party sellers has always been the way in which Amazon has actually made a ton of money. And over time, it ended up being that there was like 60+% of all of the sales that happened on Amazon were from third-party sellers rather than first-party sellers. Amazon also was a place to grow your brand. It's like this is a separate podcast, separate TED Talk, but like brand growth, the classic story is Anchor. Showing
Yeah.
up to Amazon, being a nondescript product, and building a brand that eventually gets in-store distribution was the American dream, so to speak, sometimes quite literally. This is directly in the face of that. This is saying I don't actually want broadest possible selection or number of sellers. What I'm looking for is authorized brands only. And so this is potentially several things. This is one, so like Amazon launched Haul, but I don't think that Haul was actually meant to do this quite as aggressively. But this is Amazon really saying, I don't need the endless aisle and the longest shelf. I want the best brands and the selection that matches consumer demand. And so if my shelf, and this is why it ties together with the Alexa for shopping and the 75 characters thing, is like if the shelf is 5 products of brands you don't need broadest selection. You need the best products that consumers want from the brands that they want it from. Secondarily, who has the money to spend on brand advertising, not just performance marketing, if the whole thing shifts further up funnel? Brands. And so this is the shift, and that's, I think, what I was trying to articulate.
Do you think that like changes how we think of, this is me questioning all the words we've ever known, does that change how we just define a marketplace? Because I think so many of us think of Amazon as this big marketplace and this just broad swooth of products and brands less important. Brand is less important, but this is Amazon clearly saying brand is important. And so does that like change how we define what a marketplace is and where all of the other large marketplaces will go? Maybe minus eBay. I think eBay is always going to do its own thing, but
a few years ago was looking at the share of e-com for Amazon relative to Walmart over time. So this is like online total percentage of sales that belong to each of those two retailers, calling them retailers here. Amazon's spike in market share happened pretty much directly attributed to when they opened up their marketplace. Walmart's spike in share online happened when they opened up their marketplace years later. So there's if you can visualize the graph, up and to the right for Amazon on the moment when that happened, and then several years later, up and to the right for Walmart, the moment that they opened up their marketplace. At a certain point, you have potentially everything that consumers would want. I mean, there's always going to be net new products that come through, but that's where you have actually you have people who are discerning in terms of which products make most sense for consumers. This is like your traditional buyer, like your retail buyer. But everything and doesn't necessarily everything is probably, you want things to be available to consumers, but I think this is a little bit more about experience for brands and number of offers on a PDP than it is being like, I don't want every product in the entire marketplace on the shelf, if that makes sense. So
it does.
So if I am a name household brand, I'll pick on Nike's the example in my head because like they'd walked away from Amazon because of the experience on Amazon for many different reasons, and this was a public one. I'm Nike, and I'm saying like I want to go back to this platform. I don't want Emma and Danny to also be selling the same product and competing with me on my own PDP. I'd rather the thing be gated, which is something Amazon had played with in Lux Beauty previously. So I think this is more about that, which is like you get the brands to be on the platform if you make the experience for the brands at point of conversion easier for them to control. And then the knock-on effect is that those brands are much more likely to invest in the platform that they're owning point of sale on, which is then a larger shift away from D2C selling and more toward, well, I actually do have control over at least my brand experience on the site, even if I don't have control over consumer data and my selling price.
Do you have a 30-second hot take on Alexa plus agentic ads, which was announced at Cannes? And for some timely relevance, I would love to know, like, 30 seconds, what it is, what is your hot take, and then we move on.
I mean, the gist of it, there's like a 2-minute video where they demo you ordering a pizza from Papa John's by like speaking directly to this thing, and it has a last mile fulfiller embedded in. I think it's Uber Eats, and then you can basically just order takeaway without ever having to speak to a human. My dystopian take is this is the last time that people will ever speak to each other ever again in a retail environment. That's not my real hot take. One of the things that every tech company that has had some sort of home assistant has always struggled with is that they have been used for two things, which is looking up basic information and playing music. Like agentic shopping in this way has been a real struggle because like I do not trust this thing to just reorder me the right product. Like no one really ever has. This is the closest that I've seen to an environment where I'm like, maybe. And so I think that's really interesting. And then it also then has the unintended or potentially intended benefit of being like, well, if you want to have this capability in your home, you also have to own an Alexa. And so it's both
Alexa.
Well, it's a cell of Home Assistant. It's also a cell of, again, Prime membership and collective subscription behavior so that it knows my purchases so that when I'm like, order me a pizza, it's like, well, last time you ordered this. Do you want that again? Yes. Great. Credit card saved in there? I'm like, yes. And then there's embedded ads from brands. And I'm like, ooh, add that one while you're on your way home. So, I mean, there's a world where this thing works, but this has never really been successful in the past. I think the visual component of this at least makes it so that people are more discerning, but no one's picking up a phone anymore, which is a fascinating attempt.
So, as AI-powered shopping becomes a bigger part of product discovery, brands need to understand how they show up in those experiences and how to improve their visibility. That's what Flywheel's GEO optimization service is built for. We help brands see where their products appear, how AI tools are describing them and what they're using to describe them, and whether their PDPs are sending the right signals. From there, we identify content gaps across titles, bullets, descriptions, images, attributes, and backend fields, then turn those insights into platform-specific recommendations. The goal is to make product content easier for both consumers and AI-powered shopping tools to understand, so brands can show up in the right moments, answer the right questions, and improve their chances of being recommended. If your team is exploring how AI search is changing discovery, Flywheel's GEO optimization service gives you a clear starting point and a practical roadmap for what to optimize next. Learn more at the link in the episode description. Story number 3, let's talk about Walmart's over a bazillion moves that they're further pushing into streaming and full funnel commerce media as the terminology is used in the press and whatnot. So Walmart Connect announced a series of moves that all point same direction, but advertisers can now use Walmart shopper data to target audiences on YouTube through Google. What is it? DB360, I think is the acronym there. Measure how those ads lead to Walmart sales. They also expanded CTV partnerships through Magnite and Yahoo. They're continuing to build around Vizio and recently announced plans to acquire Vibe.co, self-serve CTV advertising platform. So individually, these are all, they look like media and ad tech deals, right? But what is the bigger commerce strategy behind all of them in your opinion?
Vizio was the thing that I think everyone was kind of excited about because Vizio is the hardware. And it's kind of like it's the Trojan horse. Like you bring this TV home with you, and then all of a sudden you're advertisable too. Um, and we talked about this before, but especially relevant for this conversation. You log into your Vizio TV with your Walmart Plus email address. So that's the link. Vibe is an interesting piece because Vibe, this is what's on the Walmart website, is that it is dedicated to SMBs specifically, which contrary to the point that we were just making about the brand elevation play from Amazon, which is about brand building and big brand dollars and all of that. Like this is that's about creating a safe space for brands to invest in platform. This is saying I want small and mid-sized businesses to feel comfortable with CTV, with Walmart shopper data as both the audience builder and then the connection to point of sale. This is kind of like the Amazon playbook, where it's I want someone to feel comfortable stepping into this ecosystem and building a brand within my ads network. If you're small and mid-size, your eventual goal is to not be small and mid-size. That's what Walmart is essentially trying to sell here, is the dream of having the broadest potential distribution among this huge customer base. So I think that's sort of what's happening here, is like this is a little bit of just an easier way of brand building among if I'm calling it them consumers, but clients, brands of Walmart's. This is a different sort of set than like your big Fortune 100 brands. This is the everyone else who is trying to create brand. What's interesting, I think, is Walmart. The challenge with Walmart is always like in-store distribution. The shelf is truncated. In a lot of JBPs, what we're hearing is that Walmart is caring more specifically about online sales than offline. Like they will actually be like, well, I don't really care about how you're doing in store. Tell me how you're growing the online business. The online business creates an opportunity for brands that can't get in-store distribution to actually still grow here and get in front of consumers. So I think that's sort of what's happening.
Is that with the like focus on SMBs, is that Walmart giving up on the bigger brands, or they're saying they're all good, they're all set, and like this is just a new opportunity for us to pursue?
I mean, I don't think that this is something that the big brands can't use. I just think that it's catered toward the ones where previously a lot of the big brand activations that retailers have done. So like you think about CTV, but you also think about live sports and some of those other pieces of connectivity. Those sometimes feel like they are a little bit more exclusive. Like the budgets are so high. Sometimes it's higher than somebody's entire retail media budget. So it doesn't make as much sense for them to go after those things. This is a little bit more of the like searches. We've used the comparison of retail media search is day trading, where traditionally programmatic is a little bit more like you flight it and then you just try to make sure that it stays within flight. This is getting into the world where further up funnel is also now day trading. The other thing I've been thinking about this is like the benefit to Walmart makes a lot of sense. This is brand dollars. This is better experience as they continue to try to grow their ad network. What's the benefit to YouTube and Google? Why would they do this? And part of this for Walmart, again, is like YouTube's the biggest streamer. You talk about what we think of streaming platforms, but YouTube is the biggest streaming platform globally. The benefit to YouTube and Google is connectivity to a point of sale and closed loop attribution to an outcome, which that's the piece of the pie that they're missing that an Amazon obviously has.
And are they partnering with Walmart because Amazon won't? They obviously are partnering with Amazon too, right? Or are they just trying to have more partnerships? And did that make sense? Like why Walmart, not Amazon? But are they partnered with Amazon? I don't know.
Well, it's not necessarily spicy, but there was a whole bunch of debate where the industry all at once on LinkedIn was like, wait a second, did Amazon pause their Google ads? I don't know if you remember this.
I do remember that. Yeah.
And so I think there's been a relationship there where I think this makes a lot of sense for Walmart. The other piece for YouTube and Google is you mentioned DV360. What a lot of brands are doing right now is that they're having an internal debate of being like, well, I run Google search. I've always thought of DV360 as my DSP, but wait a second. Amazon DSP still works for non-endemics. I don't necessarily have to sell anything through Amazon. I can still use Amazon DSP to be successful. They have a clean room. They have connectivity to the streamers I'm already spending with anyway. Maybe it makes sense. I can port in other audiences and third-party audiences into the space. I don't think that this unseats Walmart's relationship with the trade desk, but I do think that it starts to create some thought with, so for brands that are advertising through GV360, the risk to them was, well, how does it connect to a sale? I think that's the benefit, is that it's like, well, here's something, and it's the world's biggest retailer, depending on how you define retailer.
And that wraps us up for this month's Commerce News. Thank you to Danny as always, and we'll see you again next month with what you need to know in commerce.